favorite Grasslands PR team. Today we're back with another reason why these overlooked and underappreciated ecosystems are objectively the best biome. I'm Nicole.
I'm Alan.
And I'm really hoping that you guys trust me. You trust me, right?
Hi, really hoping you guys trust me.
My name is Rachel.
Yeah. Oh my God. I was trying to remember everything. I was panicking. I was like, oh, I hope she doesn't go on too much longer because I really got to make this bad joke.
It had to be done.
That was well done, you guys.
Thank you.
My name's Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
Yeah, do you guys trust me?
Implicitly.
Rachel, I trust you with my life and my education.
Okay.
Yes. I was just saying how I thought you should be my emergency contact. So
That's true.
That's
yeah.
true. That was me just having that conversation. Yes.
I promise that this episode has to do with grasslands.
Okay.
That's how I'm going to start. Okay.
That's good because that's what this podcast is about.
Yeah. So I was inspired to do this episode when I was reading an incredible book that was published in November of last year by Catherine Rundle called Vanishing Treasures. And on page 136, she says, quote, "We should wake in the morning, and as we put on our trousers, we should remember the seahorse. And we should scream with awe and not stop screaming until we fall asleep, and the same the next day and the next. Each single seahorse contains enough wonder to knock the whole of humanity off its feet if we would but pay attention."
Okay.
you're talking about seagrasses and they're not grasses. Fascinating.
I mean, seahorses famously, I must say, not a grasslands animal in the typical sense.
Or are they?
In literally any sense, because seagrasses aren't grasses. Yeah.
But hold
also,
on
I don't
now.
think they live in seagrasses areas.
Hold on. I'm willing to take this journey because I think I'm pro screaming about the wonders of nature.
Yeah, no,
I'm
for
pro being wrapped with awe, you know, and just belting it from the core fibers of your being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really good thing that grasslands have so many wonderful things in them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes.
exactly.
And also, what else, Rachel?
Yeah, because we're not talking about grasslands today.
Hey. You said you trusted me.
I trust you.
We're going to get there. Okay.
Yeah.
So before I get into the real topic, let me just...
Seagrasses?
Let me just tell you a little bit about seahorses because this is how my journey started, okay? Seahorses are famously the ocean's worst swimmers. They are cygnathids, which is a fish, but like a million things are fish that are not fishy, so that really doesn't tell us much. Sure. They have one fin that they swim with. One fin. It's on their back, and they can beat it up to 50 times a second. It just pushes them forward. Okay.
There you go, one direction.
Well, they also have two small pectoral fins up by their face behind their eyes, but those are only for steering. So they can steer,
Okay.
and then they can go forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And that means that swimming is slow and exhausting for a seahorse. Catherine Rundle did describe this beautifully, so I'm going to quote her again. She said, it's, quote, "akin to standing on roller skates and attempting to propel yourself forward by waving a copy of the UN's terrifying Global Assessment Report on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services behind you." Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Sure.
And she goes on to say, "In storms, they can be tossed and spun and exhausted to death."
To death?
Yes.
Oh.
I think even in like an aquarium, you're not supposed to have like high flow aquariums because like they can't handle it.
Dang. Okay.
Seahorses can transform their colors and their shapes. They can match the plants around them and also like do little displays to other seahorses with those cells that can change their colors. Some go from maroon to gold and orange and red and pink. It makes identifying their species really, really difficult. Historically, scientists and researchers have argued over whether there's 200 in the entire world, or like a few dozen.
All right.
Okay. That's a
Because
big,
of this?
Yep.
Today, we believe there are 47 species, and 17 of those are data deficient. So we really do not know very much about them. And their habitats are, in some cases, quite data deficient as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I can't tell you more than like 3 species of seahorse.
Yeah.
But I assumed there was way more than that.
Yeah, right.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, of course, it was the descriptions of their habitat that originally turned my head. Because we have seagrass meadows to thank for the evolution of seahorses. About 100 million years ago, when geological changes produced this perfect environment for shallow seas across the world, these shallow waters exposed the life in those seas to more sunlight. And this was the perfect environment for seagrass beds to for seagrass beds to spread and thrive.
Nice.
So too did the seahorse. I will quote Catherine Rendell again. Quote, the seahorse might be a highly evolved version of the unprepossessingly worm-like pipefish. The grasses growing vertically toward the sun may over time have caused a pipefish-like swimmer to shift to an upright posture as it moved through the sea meadow. And for all their fragility, they're exquisitely evolved. So the ancestors of seahorses split from their closest relatives around the same time in the Oligocene as the spread of seagrass beds. And I will note that seagrass is all one word properly because, like many things that are all one word, the second word it's not really that thing. Like, you know how jellyfish are not fish?
Yeah.
Right.
It's all one word. Seagrass, not a grass, all one word.
Yes.
But we're going to get to that. Don't you worry.
No, I was just glad that you admitted it. So
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's not a grass. Okay.
Yes.
Does
Okay.
anyone here recognize that marker in geologic time?
You said 100
Million years ago.
million years ago. Let's think about it.
What else significant to us and our podcast
Yes.
was happening at that time?
Well, we had the Western Interior Seaway covering the middle of the North American continent,
Correct.
which was a 300-foot deep, shallow sea,
Yeah.
including the current home of the Great Plains.
That's true. That's true.
Yes.
What else in evolutionary history was going on during that time? Nicole, we literally taught this to college students like a year ago.
Is
I
it
mean, grasses. Yeah.
grasses themselves?
100 million years ago, grasses were also spreading for the first time on land. At the same time, coincidentally,
Yes.
that seagrass was spreading in the ocean.
That was a hard yes from Nicole. Coincidentally, yes. Yeah. I mean, how many other taxa of plant were
Also spreading at
spreading
the same
at
time.
that time?
Yeah.
But no. We're on this journey together, and I trust Rachel. Although I will say, I think the reason I'm trusting Rachel is because I wanted to make a post on World Manatee Day, and Nicole was like, they don't actually eat grasses.
I mean, they don't.
Yeah.
I know they don't.
This is why I said, I was like, I'm pretty sure my topic has been vetoed before,
But
but I'm forcing you to go on this journey with me anyway.
manatees, kind of like
Because they're called sea cows.
kind of like the bison of the sea.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No, I
pretty
get
good.
it. I get the parallels.
You ever seen a manatee?
Hey, Nicole.
Okay.
Have you ever seen a manatee?
In real life, like in the wild. I've seen one in the wild.
That's pretty cool.
no.
Hey, Nicole.
I don't visit the South.
Oh, okay.
I don't think you understand the parallels. I'm just going to say it.
Okay.
I don't think you understand it because I didn't either. And I'm going to tell you the moment during this research where I decided that this was a topic worthy of the best biome.
Nice.
We haven't even got there yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
Let her
will
cook, let her
reveal
cook.
This episode is very funny because of the episode that I was literally just telling Rachel about like 10 minutes ago, how I was like, you're going to hate the one that I picked. That's all I'll say.
Oh my God.
We trust each other on this. This is a safe space.
But mine is about grasses, so.
All right.
Oh, okay,
Let's not be so judgmental here. Let's let Rachel develop her thesis.
Thank you. And so at this point, I will reveal my thesis statement for this episode. I literally have it in a little call-out box in my notes. Seagrass meadows are oceanic grasslands. Sisters to the terrestrial grasslands we know and love. And in a secondary thesis with a weird icon in it, I have written, if you'll permit the cheekiness of omitting terrestrial from the grassland definition, I would go as far as
also
calling
grasses
them grasslands.
in the grassland definition, yeah. The terrestrial part and the grass part, then yes, absolutely a grassland.
Okay.
Okay.
I was also literally looking up the definition of grassland for my research for another episode.
I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
Let's stay focused. And I would like to at this stage in our journey address the issue that Nicole has with this episode, which is, what is seagrass? Now, this is where, for me, the episode condensed, okay? Because seagrass is extremely unique. It is the only flowering plant that conquered the ocean from land.
Interesting. So it developed on land, adapted to a marine environment.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is pretty ancient, which means it has diversified, and as a group, they have adapted in really unique ways since their evolutionary past, but they evolved from those early monocots during the Miocene and the Oligocene. Monocots are grasses and grass-like flowering plants. Seagrass produces flowers and seeds because they are related to monocots.
Okay.
Now, like I said, they have developed extremely unique adaptations in the world of flowering plants in order to live in saltwater. For example, they've had some pretty extreme changes in their cell wall composition. They don't have stomata anymore. And they're extremely diverse. And as Pamela Reynolds from the Smithsonian's Ocean Portal said, quote, although they often receive little attention, they are one of the most productive ecosystems in the world.
Interesting.
Little attention because, like grasslands, they are frequently overlooked as an important ecosystem. So let me show you a diagram that has the differences between seagrasses and seaweeds. I don't know if I can open this picture. So there's algae, and then there is seagrass. What do you guys notice?
Ooh, well, we're seeing a diagram that shows seaweeds. I forget what the term for this is, but they're like, they're just sort of latching on to surfaces.
Yeah.
Right? They colonize a surface, and they just kind of like, they are not, putting down roots per se. Whereas on that seagrass diagram, I think we're seeing a root system develop in the substrate of the seabed.
And you'll also notice that they produce rhizomes as well. So that means this oceanic ecosystem has an extensive network of roots and rhizomes underground, under the sediment is what you would say in the ocean ecosystems.
Sure.
Interesting.
Seaweeds and algae have a holdfast, which is the word for the thing that attaches them to something.
Hold fast.
Hold fast. It just sticks there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good simple word.
Hold fast. I like that philosophy on nouns where you just like say what it's doing.
Yeah.
And then that's the name for the noun.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's pretty good.
Yes.
So here's some noteworthy differences between seagrasses and seaweeds. Seagrasses have leaves, they have roots, they have veins, and they produce flowers and seeds. They are vascular plants like land plants, and they are the only ocean plant that has these features. They are the only flowering plant in the ocean.
Interesting.
And like I said before, the only terrestrial plant that conquered the ocean.
Conquered. Whoa.
Yeah.
That's intense.
By contrast, seaweeds and algae have a quote-unquote holdfast, which just attaches them, and it does not extend into the sediment or have any special features to absorb nutrients. They have no veins moving nutrients. They're just goopy bullshit, frankly.
Wow.
Hang on.
That diffuses
Hang on.
nutrients.
This isn't
We don't
filthy
need
business.
to.
We don't need to put a disclaimer on this episode.
I'm sorry.
Rephrase yourself.
Okay, I'm sorry. They have no veins moving nutrients through their bodies. They are goopy nonsense
Very good.
that just diffuses nutrients through their own tissues like not plants, nasty algae fish gills
Nasty
sticking out of the ground.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yes.
So this means that seagrass meadows create habitats in the ocean unlike any other habitat.
Okay.
Okay.
Isn't any habitat unlike any other habitat?
All right, Nicole. This is just now you're being pedantic here. Okay.
I'm just saying because we're drawing a comparison between a terrestrial ecosystem and an oceanic ecosystem. This one is extremely different from everything else in the ocean.
Yeah.
And I will argue that the ways that it's different have a lot in common with grasslands.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, right? The structure that a terrestrial plant ecosystem creates is far different. Like and this is the only, that's confirmed the only plant, because primitive plants went from water to land.
Yeah.
Right. But only one taxa of plant went from land to water. Went
Back into the ocean.
back to the
rather.
ocean, to marine.
Yeah.
to a
Yes, it's the only
environment.
marine one.
Wild.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, this evolution took place around the same time as the evolution of grasses on land and the spread of grasses on land, which is
Okay.
kind of cool.
Yeah.
So this brings us to the real meat of the episode, which is a discussion on whether a seagrass meadow is a grassland.
Okay.
So in order to begin this discussion, we first need to define a grassland, which
Yes.
Nicole and I taught an undergrad course on grasslands and found the definitions of grasslands to be just all over the place. It really depends on the decade, the researchers, the country that you're talking
Sure.
with about how they define it. I did write down how we determined for our class what the defining features of a grassland are.
Okay.
But I mean, I will open it to you guys as my fellow grassland educators to help me define this first.
You want me to try?
Yeah.
Okay. A grassland is I would say a grassland is a disturbance-mediated ecosystem
Okay.
whose desired successional state remains composed primarily of grasses and forbs.
Okay.
I think that's as basic and as general as I can make it.
Yeah.
Okay. What would you say,
I
Nicole?
mean, yeah.
Similar thing? Okay. In our undergraduate class, this is how we chose to define it. 3 features that they tend to have in common. Number 1, plant communities where grasses and grass-like species are dominant. That's because there are grasslands where the primary species is a grass-like plant, but is not technically grass. And those things on land do qualify as grasslands.
Okay.
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 We've talked about examples of that in the past, like tussock tundra and stuff. Yeah. The second characteristic is infrequent or low abundance of woody vegetation.
Yes.
So far, both of these things
Yes.
apply to seagrass meadows.
There are no sea trees, Nicole.
Yeah.
that I know of.
Yeah, mangroves hate salt water.
That's true, right? Yeah.
Oh, we'll talk about that. Yeah,
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
we'll just mention it.
Sure.
And the third definition is where we're kind of squinting really, really hard. Bear with me. We decided that they are generally arid climates or experience periods of drought.
Generally arid climates.
Yes, which is to say that there is a distinct precipitation gradient under which grasslands develop worldwide.
Sure.
Or there are periods of drought which kind of mediate where trees are able to grow and at least allows the grasses to, or grass-like creatures to thrive, right?
True. Yeah. That's fair. Yeah.
So I don't know about that. I don't think you guys are going to permit me to say that salt water is arid.
No, yeah.
Well, salty things do dry other things out. So
I was thinking about that, but then I decided that held no water in terms of argument.
No water.
I do have a description of what I would consider like a precipitation gradient in ocean environments because they're not really mediated by the presence of water. They're mediated by the presence of other things like sunlight.
Sure.
And so there is a gradient like that these things fall under,
Sure.
which might be an analog to it. But obviously it's wet, so
yeah.
yeah. And I will point out that some other definitions that throw my argument into disarray included things like it specifically being a terrestrial ecosystem and disturbance, so maintained by fire, grazing, drought, and or freezing temperatures.
Yeah.
So those things are also, well, the second one we'll talk about, but it's a little cheeky of me to try to claim an oceanic ecosystem as a grassland, which is why my true thesis is that it is the grassland of the oceans.
Sure.
Okay.
Ooh. All right. That we can get on board with.
Yeah. So let me describe a seagrass meadow as an ecosystem real quick to you. And then we'll talk about the things that it has in common with grasslands specifically. Obviously, the hydrology is completely different in this environment.
Yes.
But seagrass meadows are among the most common coastal habitats on Earth. In the same way that grasslands grow along that precipitation gradient, where rainfall can't quite support trees but isn't quite a desert, for seagrass meadows, that gradient is more of a water depth issue. The depth of water and light penetration through the ocean is one of the things that makes the difference between like forests, quote unquote, like kelp forests, and these meadows, quote unquote, where seagrasses thrive.
Okay.
And water clarity is really essential to seagrasses because their growth and productivity are mostly controlled just by how much light is able to reach them. So that's why I'm making this an analog for precipitation here. In a way, this is the true precipitation gradient, how much light can precipitate down through the layers of ocean and sediment and stuff. Yeah, the canopy, if you will.
Yes.
So let's talk about some of these ecosystem drivers that characterize grasslands and whether they relate to seagrass meadows. The first thing I want to talk about is disturbances.
Okay.
Yeah, because this is really key to a grassland ecosystem, and I honestly wasn't sure if this would apply at all. But as it turns out, seagrass ecosystems are inherently dynamic ecosystems. They respond to environmental change across a huge range of scales. And this is an area that requires more research, but disturbances are an inherent natural part of these ecosystems. Some examples of the natural disturbances they experience include grazing, storms, ice scouring, and desiccation from tidal areas.
Makes sense.
And all of these things are an inherent part of seagrass ecosystem dynamics.
Sure.
And in fact, seagrasses themselves as a group of plants have really significant phenotypic plasticity, which means that they can express their genes in a lot of ways. They are basically easily able to adapt quickly to changing environmental conditions that you would expect in disturbing circumstances. Of course, human activities have kind of pushed this disturbance beyond what the ecosystem can naturally withstand.
Sure.
And because of that, human activities are responsible for the majority of seagrass meadow loss. But I do want to get into some of these in particular, especially grazing with the seagrass meadows. And that's because seagrass meadows are characterized by grazers and the presence of grazers. And I'm not just talking about like little tiny things, which of course there are in seagrass meadows, but they also have things like green turtles, dugongs, manatees, fish, geese, swans, sea urchins, crabs. Seagrass beds are really important feeding grounds. And some of the organisms that are feeding there, especially the large organisms who feed directly on those plants, the seagrass is a major component of their diets. That's like manatees, dugongs, green sea turtles, and geese specifically are some examples of megafauna on seagrass meadows. And I'm not using that word to be cheeky. That is what they're described as scientifically.
Yeah.
These grazers are also responsible for spreading their seeds. So like grasses and plenty of other plants that are not grasses, they do have clonal growth, especially through spreading rhizomes. They'll just pop up bunches of new materials, new plants. But they also spread through seeds, and grazers are consuming these seeds and spreading them as they travel along the meadow through their feces. So important distributors of the plants themselves.
Nice.
To give you an idea of just how much grazing these animals do, an adult dugong eats about 64 to 88 pounds of seagrass every single day.
Yeah, buddy.
An adult green sea turtle can eat about 4.5 pounds of seagrass every day. And many of these large animals are actually endangered now, in large part because of habitat destruction, but also because of hunting. And even though they're endangered now and they're considered to be rarities now, they used to be very, very common. This is a quote from Smithsonian's Ocean Portal on the subject. Quote, "It's estimated that before Europeans settled the Americas in the 1400s, the number of green sea turtles supported by seagrass meadows was 15 to 20 times the number and biomass of large hooved animals in the Serengeti Desert alive today."
Dang.
And that's just green sea turtles. They go on to say, quote, "These abundant large grazers probably kept seagrass meadows cropped short like a putting green." Which for me calls to mind the images we get of prairie dog towns where they're keeping their lawns very well clipped to the ground.
I have a grazing question.
Yeah.
You might not know this, but I know that because you mentioned urchins, and urchins are an issue in some like kelp forest environments. Are there issues where you have like just way too many urchins and they're destroying seagrass?
That's actually not something that I encountered, which surprised me. And it may be that that's a source of some habitat destruction. But what I saw much more often in scientific papers and reports that were, trying to repair these environments, actually the issue is a lack of grazers.
Gotcha.
And the loss of especially megafaunal grazers has led to ecosystem degradation, which again struck me as being so similar to a lot of our grasslands on land today. And that's because the seagrass meadows, evolved under grazing pressure.
Sure.
And that grazing pressure, like we would recognize in like a grassland ecosystem, allows competition between species to be sort of smoothed out. And this is the condition that these plants need and want to thrive and create a healthy ecosystem. And a lot of seagrass meadows have lost their historic megafauna species. So especially in the Florida coasts, one of the results of the lack of grazing is that more and more seagrass meadows are becoming dominated by like single species or just like a few very aggressive species. And it's basically killing all heterogeneity of those plant populations.
Okay.
Which also means that they're far less resilient to changes, which again, we've talked about in this podcast before with grass species and other forbs, where if the entire seagrass meadow is one species that really sucks at adapting to changes in nutrients, then a change in nutrients wipes out the entire ecosystem and it collapses. Whereas if it was full of thriving, many species, heterogeneous, composition of this community. If one species died out, it wouldn't really make that much of a difference, and it would probably be able to bounce back because the other species maintained the whole ecosystem. So the loss of megafauna has been a detriment, and there is a lack of grazing in these ecosystems for the most part. From what I could find. Somebody out there who studies seagrasses might be like, what? They're talking about seagrasses and cursing me under their breath because they know much more than me. But from what I was able to find, that's what most of the reporting is on. Yeah.
Oh, I had a question.
Yeah.
But I think it might derail you too much.
No.
So maybe I'll just never ask it again.
I mean, you're already derailed, so.
You're right. My bad.
Also,
Here's
we're
my
about to move
question.
on to another topic, so it's perfect.
Perfect.
Yeah.
My question is, okay, on the I guess the anatomy, life history of seagrasses, because that diagram you showed us, the seagrasses had they had open flowers. So my question is, are these like these are self-pollinating, right? I mean, how are these seagrasses like? What are the flowers just vestigial? Like,
That's such a good question.
like all the reasons that plants flower don't really apply in a marine environment, So like, what are they doing with those? Is my, you know what I mean? Like why not just have a closed flower bud that self-pollinates and then releases seeds? Like, a lot of plants do, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, what's the deal there?
So in the community of seagrasses, here's what happens. Pollen is moved from flower to flower on ocean currents the same way that grass pollen and other wind pollinating plants moves through wind currents. And to combat the fact that they are in the ocean and not in the air, they produce one of the largest pollen grains of flowering plants. So it's a really big pollen grain. I saw a description that said that sometimes they make stringy clumps because they're just kind of like pollen. But basically the same thing that allows flowering plants in wind-dominated ecosystems to thrive with that system of pollination. They're able to do that with ocean currents.
Sure.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Nicole, sounds like a grassland to me.
I mean, it's not.
It's a grassland.
It's very similar.
It's a grass.
It has a lot in common.
It doesn't have any poaceae, which is the grasses and grass-like species.
Well, not yet.
Nicole, we've talked about other grasslands that don't have literal grass species.
Have we?
I think we have.
When?
Yeah. Tussock tundras.
Tussocks?
Tussock grasses.
Tussock
aren't
grasses. Yes, they are. There's tussock clumping grasses.
Yeah, there are grasses that form tussocks, and not all tussock grasses are grasses.
Okay, I don't remember
buddy.
talking about a grass that was not a grass. But it might have
sedges and things like that are often characterized in grassland communities.
Yeah, no, I understand. They're all poaceae, though.
Not all the time.
Okay.
More on that possibly in another episode.
Okay.
Okay. So in conclusion, grazing pressures, which is a really significant form of disturbance in grassland ecosystems, is critical to the health of seagrass meadows as well. Let's move along. One of the other things that is usually pretty unique about grassland ecosystems has to do with life below the surface in a grassland. I had a question going into this comparison then about seagrass meadows, which is, are there burrowing animals in a seagrass meadow? In order to answer this question, I had to learn some new words because you can't Google grassland terms and get any ocean answers.
Fair. Yeah.
So let me tell you what I learned. One word, benthic, I think we're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
That just means living at or in the bottom of a body of water. Okay, so we're getting warmer.
Yes.
Epifauna is the animals that are attached to a surface. So benthic epifauna are things that just attach to a surface.
Okay.
Cool. So what do you call a creature that lives in the sediment? An infauna.
Infauna. Okay.
Infauna, which is a stupid word. I just have to say. I hate it.
E-N.
No, I-N.
Infauna.
In
like
fauna.
in. Okay.
Yeah, that is the scientific word, and I hate it.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Infauna.
It took me way too long to even find that word existed to know what to search for, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
disgusting.
Yeah, that's an unsatisfying word, I will
It
say.
is.
Yeah. So infauna and epifauna are opposites.
Okay.
And infauna are the creatures that live within the sediments, which means an infaunal benthic community, or the infauna community, describes the quote-unquote underground community in an ocean ecosystem. And as it turns out, an infauna community thrives in seagrass meadows.
Okay.
Some examples are like the rigid pen shell and a bunch of other bivalve mollusks, so things like clams. They act as filter feeders within the sediments. Of course, there are also a lot of worms, nematodes, isopods, and a lot of larvae of things like crustaceans that live within the sediment. These can be not just detritivores, but straight up herbivores that are feeding on roots and plant material, and also carnivores. So they have their own little ecosystem going on
Sure.
underground. That's not the correct word. I'm using air quotes.
Yeah.
In this ecosystem. Even more of these are also just considered deposit feeders, which is like a comparison to earthworms, right? Things like peanut worms and polychaetes are moving through the sediment, eating the sediment, extracting whatever organic particles they can from it, and then pooping it out like annelid worms do on land.
Nice.
Now, I'm going to make a crazy claim in this episode where I haven't done that once.
Yeah.
Which is that I think one of the real sediment-dwelling, burrowing soil, quote-unquote, aerating creatures in these meadows is actually the seagrass itself. Right, okay. So seagrasses are ecosystem engineers. Their roots, rhizomes, and leaves literally engineer the environment. Some of that has to do with soil aeration, which is a characteristic of some grasslands.
Sure.
Like, how much time do we spend talking about crayfish doing that in grasslands, right? So I'm like, where is the equivalent to this
Yes.
going on in this community, right?
Sure.
Okay. I feel like I'm losing Alan.
No, I'm here. I'm with you all the way. Continue, Rachel.
Okay, so let me talk for a moment about how seagrass meadows engineer their own ecosystems.
Okay.
And a lot of this has to do with their extensive roots and underground rhizomes, which again are totally unique in the oceans. Some of the things they do are holding sediment together, preventing erosion, making nutrients trapped in the sediment available to everyone else in the ecosystem. They slow water currents, literally altering the turbulence of the ocean environment. And they also cause sediment to settle, which literally builds up ocean floor.
They're killing the oceans. No, I'm joking.
Oh, they're gathering. I mean, yeah, that's like the purpose of, if you were to go just a few dozen feet above where the seagrasses are, you'd have, all these beach grasses and sea amaranth and stuff that are having the same effect, but like creating an island, like a barrier island.
Right,
that's doing the same thing, just a little bit deeper.
No, that's exactly right. And, like you said, up on the dunes, there might be coastal blue stem grasses doing this same thing. Yeah. So their roots and rhizomes are holding the sediment together and also oxygenating the sediment. So they are dumping oxygen into the sediment. And I didn't look far into this because I don't know much about soil and I was afraid Alan would ask me questions. But there were some like scientific reputable articles discussing seagrass meadow sediments with the word soil in them. Oxygenating the sediment is facilitating their own growing conditions. And everything they're doing here is just creating the perfect conditions for them to grow. They trap sediment, it settles, water clarity increases, more sunlight pours in, etc. And because they're so good at doing this, they often grow in really nutrient-poor environments. And especially if they have clear water, because they have this unique ability to actually extract nutrients from the soil that no other ocean plant can do. And this increases the nutrients available to everyone, not just because their bodies can feed things indirectly, but they literally diffuse nutrients out of their membranes into the ocean around them as well.
Interesting.
This kind of reminded me of the way that grasses make more water available to other members of the community by digging those really deep roots to extract that rare resource from those soils.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just have another weird physiology question. So like they aerate, they oxygenate the sediment or the soil, but you said they don't have stoma.
They don't have stomata.
There's no gas exchange happening. Like they're not like sucking the oxygen out of that water like a fish. But they are producing oxygen and then just like exuding it through the roots.
They are taking, so they don't have stomata. They do have mechanisms for diffusing directly with the ocean.
Okay.
Unlike seaweeds, they also have vascular tissue to move that around.
Okay.
So they are taking carbon from the oceans and then dumping oxygen back out. It's again, plants respirate, for the audience, the opposite of people. So we breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. The plants are taking in carbon, breathing out oxygen through their roots and tissues.
And you had mentioned, I think at like the very start, their cell walls are a little bit different than terrestrial plants. So that is that how that exchange is happening? It's just like a little bit,
Yeah, I didn't look too deep. I mean, there's like diagrams you can find online that really outline the differences. But they just have a unique mechanism for that exchange to occur.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I like weird things.
It is super cool.
Wow. Alan said, I like weird things, and then punched me 3 times in the shoulder.
Yeah, that's why I like Nicole.
So I should clarify here, too, that they are not only dumping oxygen into the soil, but they are also dumping it into the water column as well. So they're creating a really oxygen-rich environment, which is also reducing the acidity of the ocean. So that's like, there's a lot of engineering going on here too. Now, one of the other huge ways they engineer ecosystems has to do with how they trap sediment. Picture it with me. grass-like plants waving in a shallow sea, right? Getting kind of battered by waves. The literal bodies of the plant, the leaves that are flowing through the water, are causing the sediments moving through the water column to kind of hit the leaves and then fall and drop into the ground layer, the detritus layer underneath them, right? As the leaves are flowing around, they're also acting like sort of a what's the word? Baffle.
Oh. Baffle.
Yeah, I don't know what that means, to be honest. I was going to Google it.
Isn't a baffle like it's something that slows something down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like a boat. Don't boats have baffles or something?
Probably.
Or planes?
I don't know.
I think planes have baffles. Do birds?
So
Planes
whatever a baffle is, the grasses are that. Seagrasses, excuse me.
Makes sense.
But okay, so what actually matters here is that they are stopping the free movement of water currents and literally absorbing some of that like energy and force. And because of that, they slow down water currents, which also helps sediment settle and also reduces the erosion occurring on the coast.
Nice.
So their bodies literally affect currents, waves, and the turbulence of that part of the ocean. The ultimate effect of this is that seagrasses slow the impact of storm surges and can absorb that impact from those sorts of disturbances. And seagrasses are so good at trapping sediment that the sediment can accumulate so quickly that they bury and store carbon, becoming so deep that objects like wooden shipwrecks and other archaeological sites will get buried so deep that the oxygen can no longer reach it and decomposition cannot happen. So you see a ton of archaeological sites preserved, and people, I'm not going to pretend to know which profession this is, but I saw reports of people creating like artificial seagrass meadows specifically to preserve archaeological sites of interest with shipwrecks they wanted to preserve.
Oh my gosh, that's
in
cool.
certain parts of the world. Yeah.
It's cool. Very cool. Blackbeard's gold is still out there, guys. Just letting you know.
Yeah. This also really reminded me of those Arctic carbon sequestration sites in those like Pleistocene mammoth steppe ecosystems. Those were like these grasslands in Siberia where they were so efficient at storing carbon, mainly because they were just getting buried deeper and deeper by just this huge accumulation of growth. And that is something really similar to what's happening with seagrass meadows.
Sure. Whenever things get buried like that, does sonar penetrate the sediment enough to like refine those things?
Oh,
and
totally.
stuff?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I think that's part of why a lot of those sites have been discovered. 100%.
Yes, indeed. Stuff sinks down, and it's interesting that it's like a completely anaerobic environment that it just becomes preserved.
Yeah,
you know? Like, it's really cool. Yeah.
It's just so good at doing that. It's crazy. And this means that seagrass meadows are extremely good at storing carbon when we're talking about climate change and mediating those impacts. It also means that seagrass meadows are really good at increasing organic matter accumulating in the sediment. And here's where I put soil in parentheses. And what's crazy is that on the surface layer where the seagrasses and their roots are actually developing on top of all this, the oxygen excreted through their roots also detoxifies the sulfates of all those organic materials that would otherwise be creating those anaerobic conditions. So the top layer of soil with their super oxygenated roots stays extremely healthy, oxygenated soil, and it buries all of this preserved carbon underneath those accumulated layers.
It's very cool.
And this is one of the big reasons why I was like, this has so many parallels to what's happening in grasslands that's really unique about those ecosystems, especially when you consider how grasslands are just so good at building up layers and layers and layers of dead material.
Yeah.
And then how does that get removed? It's either fire or it just gets buried, right?
Yeah.
That's how grasslands take care of all that excess organic matter. If it's not being removed by grazers, it becomes susceptible to fire, or again, in these high productive environments, it might get buried, which is
That's cool.
crazy. Yeah. Which brings me to the last thing I want to talk about, which is the closest thing I could find to a fire analog in seagrass meadows, which obviously has nothing to do with fire. But interestingly, it has to do with fresh water flushing the ecosystems.
Okay.
These are coastal environments, right? To set the scene, seagrass meadow die-offs are becoming quite common. And there was a study published last year in Florida that suggested that in some cases, the plants were having trouble keeping up with the building sediment. Basically, they were like, oh, I'm so good at creating sediment. Oh, God, I'm drowning, and now I can't keep up with it. Blah, and then they die. That's my really scientific summary of the problem. Ultimately, their ability to get oxygen is messed up. And this is because of human activities like dredging and things like that, making the water chunky. But also, a lot of it has to do with human-altered hydrology on land. And that's the part that surprised me. So this is a study that happened in Florida where the Everglades are one of the huge sources of runoff of fresh water. And in history, like in the historic past, the Everglades flushed the Florida Bay far more than it does now. In fact, saltwater is literally seeping upstream into mangrove forests where it's killing off mangroves because mangroves hate pure salt water. This is in part because of sea level rise and also because humans have just cut off fresh water from draining into the ocean.
Sure.
And I think it's helpful in this instance to just think about how extremely managed every single water source is in this country. I mean, like even Quivira National Wildlife Refuge here in Kansas, which is a wild natural saltwater marsh, every single pool on the marsh has like drains, pipes, valves, pumps, so that water managers can select which pool is going to get all the water in periods of drought where they have limited access to water. They can control how much water is getting into the refuge from the nearby water source. Like none of this is really natural anymore. It's all managed by people. And so, of course, people have kind of cut off all of that drainage in Florida. And local water managers and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers have a stated goal of rectifying this in Florida. They're trying to increase the freshwater runoff that's allowed to dump out of the Everglades in order to prevent the catastrophe of saltwater getting so far inland that it kills Florida's aquifers. You know, there's a lot of things going on here that are negative. And one of the negative impacts has to do with seagrass meadows. Now, in the study last year, they were concerned that by increasing the flush rate, they might negatively impact seagrass meadows. So that's what they were looking at.
Sure.
And the results of their study is that actually flushing this meadow more in line with historic levels would have an increased, would have a significant benefit to the ecosystem because it's so good at accumulating sediments. When nothing is flushing that out, that's causing them to drown. It's messing up their nutrient cycling. If they were flushed and a lot of that excess nutrients and sediments and organic matter were able to be flushed out, they would be able to keep up with it and maintain a healthier ecosystem.
So this doesn't have anything to do with the fact that they can't regulate themselves properly in fresh water, but it's just they need something to actually push, like physically disturb the
Yeah,
environment.
literally they
mechanically.
need, fresh, in this ecosystem at least, they needed that fresh water pouring in to literally disturb the buildup of organic matter and flow it out of the ecosystem so that they could, keep doing their thing so well without drowning in sediment. And they found that the freshwater input, flushing the ecosystem of excess nutrients and stuff, does create a more heterogeneous, healthy seagrass meadow. And of course, healthy seagrass meadows are more resilient, and resilient seagrasses keep the coast from literally eroding away. And so this is a benefit to everyone. I know it's kind of difficult to think about like flushing fresh water away into the ocean, probably for some people. But we also don't want to flush the entire Florida coastline into the ocean or, well, I mean, ultimately it would really harm a lot of people and wildlife to lose the freshwater resources in Florida because the ocean has encroached so much from all of this deterioration.
Oh, yeah.
It's a weird problem of like long-term sustainability versus like I need water to survive and I don't want to hurt the Everglades and like stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And it's helpful to think of this in terms of like, it's not just crazy nature people saying we need seagrass meadows to be pretty again.
Yeah.
Like seagrass meadows are the thing holding the coast together from the ocean side of things.
Yeah, certainly.
And I mean, for that reason alone, and there's countless other reasons why this should be a goal. That's a stated goal of the U.S. Corps of Army Engineers and the water basin management systems there.
Yeah. I mean, especially for places that are prone to hurricanes and storm surges, you want to have like barrier islands and things.
Yeah.
That's why they're called barrier islands, because they take the brunt of it. And not, the place where the people live. Yeah.
Right. And like I said earlier, seagrass meadows, healthy seagrass meadows, absorb the impacts of storm surges and literally slow down the water and lessen the impacts. Of course, there's limits there too, and increased powerful storms that they really can't recover from are a problem.
Right.
But I mean, not having them at all is a far worse problem. So that's why, at least in this ecosystem and ecosystems like it, something like freshwater flushing through the ecosystem is sort of an analog to what fire is doing on land. It is promoting more nutrient cycling. It is getting rid of old detritus and organic matter that is kind of choking out what exists there already and allowing it to continue thriving under like an equal level of competition because of that disturbance, keeping things fair. Yeah. And just to kind of like wrap all of this up, a lot of the descriptions and language we've been using talking about like the coast eroding away and the way that these things are being held together, it really struck me as losing seagrass meadows in the ocean would essentially lead to an oceanic dust bowl occurring.
Okay.
And, just like clouds of sediment blocking out the sun, killing more of the organisms creating these ecosystems, just causing mass erosion of the things there that are necessary for us and the animals living there to survive. And to me, that was like a really stark picture of the ways that these ecosystems are so related in terms of how they function, if not whether they're underwater. So that is all of the points that I had to make. And I just want to conclude by discussing whether you think you agree with my real thesis statement, which is that seagrass meadows are oceanic grasslands. They are the sisters to the terrestrial grasslands that we know and love.
I mean, yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think, like you said, structurally similar. They play an ecologically very similar role. they are sort of the salty, sister of the grasslands, which again, and coastal grasslands occur very close by because these are also both coastal ecosystems. So like actual grasslands, very close. So yeah.
Not to get too weird brand nerdy, but it almost feels like the parallels of like the material plane and the Feywild or something, where it's like, oh yeah, that's the same mountain, but here it's covered in weird flowers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same thing. Different song, different covers of the same song.
Ooh.
Different cover band.
That's a fun way to put it.
Yeah.
Nicole, you're not saying anything and I'm worried. Go ahead.
I mean, you guys just keep talking.
That's a podcast. That's what you do.
I mean, yes, sister ecosystems covers, all that stuff. Yeah. Not a grassland, but yes.
Yeah. It feels wrong to claim that it doesn't technically say terrestrial in all of these. Like, 'cause I think it's implied. So yeah, I mean, I'll agree with you based on that. But yeah, the parallels that I found while researching really made me happy.
Yeah.
Because I was like seeing all these little opportunities to talk about grassland ecosystem issues in this weird seahorse landscape. And you know, as you think about those horrifically weak, exhausted little swimmers swimming around, it makes sense why seagrass meadows are their home. And in the softness of those grassy leaves, the shelter against the raging storm, the protection of the settlement, the high oxygen, the thriving life all around that they can ambush because they don't graze. They ambush invertebrates. It's the perfect little shelter for a little upright seahorse to evolve and to continue living today, moving vertically through the reeds, almost like a rail, which also evolved to be vertically compressed.
Wow. That's really beautiful, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank you for painting that picture for us. Nicole, final thoughts?
I mean, I already said what I said. No, it's like I said at the beginning, it is very fun parallels, and it's a great ecosystem. Like, I love seagrass meadows, absolutely. But yeah.
You just said I was talking too much, so I was making space for you.
Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome. Well, Rachel, that was a wonderful, if slightly atypical episode of The Best Biome.
Thank you. Grasslands still are the best biome.
Sure.
But I would posit that seagrass meadows are the best ecosystem in a different biome because they are like grasslands.
Cool. All right. Yeah. Take that, oceans. That's fair. No, very good episode. And, nice change of pace. Thank you for listening. If you're like me, dear listener, you're probably saying the word dugong over and over in your head. Just go ahead and say it out loud a couple times.
Dugong.
Nicole? Dugong?
Are we Pokemon?
It's a beautiful word. It's a beautiful animal. They're like a manatee with a spoon tail. Little beautiful mermaids.
Don't manatees also have spoon tails?
I thought they had like flappy tails.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, they have like whale tails, if you will.
Yeah.
All right, settle down. Okay. The Best Biome is produced through our nonprofit, GrasslandGroupies, dedicated to inspiring the conservation of grasslands wherever they may exist. In the show notes, you can find our website, phone number, and socials. Text, call, or post your suggestions, fan mail, or hate mail. If you enjoyed this show and you want to support us, please tell all of your friends about us and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. We could not do this without your support. and we will see you again in 1 month.
Thanks, guys.
Dugong.